Reminder, today's conference is being recorded.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Helen Hall and I'm one of IEEE USA's webinar coordinators. I just want to remind you that we will be adding more webinars to the schedule throughout the year, so please visit our website to see if there's anything you're interested in. Also, there are a few housekeeping rules. Since the webinar is being recorded, it's important that you use your mute button and keep your phone muted. And Dr. Blank, our presenter, will answer your questions after the presentation. So type your questions in the chat pod, and he will respond to your questions after the presentation. Okay, you can mute your phones by pressing *6 and if you have a mute button. So, okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Blank.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, which time zone you're in. It should be close to lunchtime, just before, or is lunchtime, or shortly after, depending upon your location. And I'm very glad that you had the initiative to join our webinar today, because it's a very exciting subject. I'm going to be spending the next hour or so with you, sharing some ideas with you which will help you if your interest is in consulting or if you're actually consulting right now. Our audience today probably consists of people who are already consulting and trying to build or expand their business, or it may include some people who have been thinking about consulting for a while and they're not sure if they really want to do it or if they know how to do it. And hopefully today we can answer some of those questions for you. Some of you may have remembered some time ago we did a webinar called Consulting 101 on how to get started. And at that time we went through some of the details of some of the things you need to think about when you're getting started, some of the details that are very important. And this is a follow-up which many of you requested to Consulting 101, this being now Consulting 102, where we're going to take a jump into the next subject, which is how to find clients. Well, today we, due to technological challenges and so forth, we decided that we would go with a series of slides, as you're about to see. And since there's no real live video of me, you'll have to settle for the occasional picture that shows up on the slides. Not all the slides have them, just one or two of them. So you'll have an idea of who is talking to you. So let's get started then with this very vital subject about how to find clients. And I should start off by telling you a little bit about my own background, because it's important for you to realize what I came from and what I've been doing and the kinds of companies I've been dealing with, because you may be able to extract some useful information just from that part of it. So I will go into a little bit more detail about some of the companies I've been consulting with, and you'll begin to see what kind of companies seek consultants, and then you'll know how to approach them. So let's get started. First of all, I want to take care of the question that often comes up. People say, is your name really blank? And the answer is yes, it really is. And they make several interesting stories. I think I've heard most of them. But the one I like best is the one that I have to share with you, because it really is something I'll never forget. Many years ago, I used to be a professor at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I walked into the classroom the very first day that I joined the university, and I went up in front of the class and said, "Good afternoon, class. My name is Dr. Blank." Well, they started laughing. It really cracked them up, because for one thing, the university never knows for sure who's going to be teaching what courses. And so they tend to put in their bulletins and their catalogs just the word blanks. They spelled out blank, 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 blank. He's going to be teaching all these courses. So they thought it was kind of funny that I come and claim to be Dr. Blank and I'm going to teach all these courses. I had to say, no, really, that really is my name. And I just want you to remember my name, because if your mind ever goes blank, you'll have the correct name. Well, so much for that. About 25 years later, I was in Los Angeles at a conference, and a young man whom I did not recognize, he came up to me and he said, "Sir, put your hand over your badge, because I know you, but I don't want to see your name." And I was with my wife, and he was with his wife. And he says, I know, I've had you as professor years ago. He says, I'll tell you what your name is. And he closed his eyes, put his hand up onto his forehead and said, oh, yes, I remember. You're Dr. Nothing. And I was very happy in a way because I had made a point that when his mind goes blank and there's nothing there, to remember the name. So much a little bit of humor to get us started. On the very first slide, Consulting 102, How to Find Clients. Right now, I'm actively consulting as a technical consultant in the areas of electrical and electronic engineering, primarily in the area of controls and telecommunications. And we'll talk with some of these things as we go along, but my expertise is primarily in analysis, design, software, hardware, a little bit of everything. Along the way, you'll find that I have a very strong interest in teaching, and so I started a company, which I'm now the director of Engineering Update Institute, and we found a very interesting subject that I really enjoy doing, is teaching review courses for people who plan to take the FE and the PE exams. And I've had so much fun with those that I decided to put them all onto DVDs and video and make them available because I so just enjoy the act of communicating with students, even if it's by telephone or by email or fax in some cases. I'm currently serving on the IEEE USA Board of Directors as the Vice President of Career and Member Services. And just quickly, a couple of things in the past, I've been the chair of AICN. Now, AICN you may not recognize, but I hope you do. That's IEEE's Alliance of IEEE Consultants Networks. IEEE had the wisdom years ago to start forming these networks all over the USA and now overseas. And these consultants networks have proven to be very helpful to all of us who are in the consulting business. I served as the national chair for the AICN 2 different times from 1999 to 2002, and then again 2008-2009. I also did serve on the USA Board of Directors as a member at large for a couple of years, and as the IEEE USA Board of Directors Vice President way back in 03 and 04 for member activities. Okay, now I'm gradually moving on to the next slide, and this will give you some information that I call the outline of a 6-hour seminar. Normally, I do a lot of these 6-hour seminars. They're done typically like an all-day Saturday, 6-hour training, and it covers a lot. It covers how to get started, how to set your fees, how to calculate what you should be charging a person or charging a client. It also tells you how to win the contract. We're in a very competitive world, and you'll find that we'll need to know how to beat the competition, because when you go after a consulting contract, you're not the only person sometimes. There are other people also trying to win the same contract. So it's important that you become very competitive and know how to win the contract. So as you see in the outline on the screen, the 6-hour seminar divided basically into 4, maybe 5 parts, including a conclusion. Session 1 is what we did a year ago or so on how to get started, and that was Consulting 101. Then we just sort of skipped over because we felt that people really want to jump to Session 4 more quickly on how to find clients. That's where we are today with Consulting 102. And if all goes well, maybe sometime in the future, if there's enough interest, I can do one on how to set your fees, and then maybe another on how to win the contract. But for now, we're going to focus today on how to find clients. So going on to the next slide, this will give you some more introductory and background information which is relevant to what we're about to tell you. And let me tell you why this is important. The consulting business is a very, very individual thing. There are no general rules that works for everybody in every place and every time. There are just certain things that work for certain people. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is things that have worked for me. And I cannot tell you that it will work for you just as well. It may even work better for you. But I cannot tell you the things I haven't done because that's not my experience. I'm going to be limiting myself only to things that I'm familiar with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own background a little bit. I mentioned consulting that I'm doing, the company I have going, the seminars and consulting. And something I've really enjoyed doing, almost like a hobby in the past year or so, is I help to start up IEEE consultants networks. As long as I can find a nucleus of 3 or 4 people someplace who are interested, don't have to be consultants, they have to be interested. I'll work with them and help them get started, and so will IEEE USA will help you start a consultants network and then watch that thing grow and how it benefits everybody within the network. So I enjoy starting up networks, and we'll talk a little more about that later in the webinar today. Okay, quickly then, my background is all electrical engineering. I got my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD all in electrical engineering, and minor in mathematics. And then I really was one of these people that went to school and did it all before I decided to go out and get a job and start working. Okay, on the next slide, I spent some time in the academic world. I mentioned that too. I was a university professor. I taught at the University of Florida as a part-time faculty member while I was working full-time in industry. I kind of like the idea of doing both at the same time, consulting or working as the case might be, and doing some teaching, and then going back and forth. Then, as I mentioned earlier, I went to Marquette University where I taught full-time, and I was consulting part-time in industry. Then I was at UCLA where I was a part-time faculty member and worked as an employee, and then I became a full-time consultant while I was teaching at UCLA. I also taught at Northern Illinois University, did some part-time consulting, and finally I taught at Illinois Institute of Technology. And the reason for the two asterisks is because I want to be sure to mention that's my alma mater. I went to school there and got my bachelor's there. It's nice to go back there as a professor because it gives you a chance to see it from a different point of view, from the faculty's point of view instead of seeing it from the student's point of view, which I did for the 4 years while I was there. Okay, moving on now, let's talk about industry. I work as a regular employee. This means I was a 40-hour person. I got a salary, I got benefits, and all the things that accrue to being a full-time employee. I worked for a company called Ingersoll Milling Machine Company. Then I worked for Chicago Aerial Industries, which is now called Recon Optical. I worked for Honeywell in Florida, Litton Guidance Control, and for Burroughs Corporation before they became known as Unisys. Those were places where I worked as an employee, and I want to mention that because I'm going to come back to that later and talk about how the places where you used to work can be fertile ground for finding consulting business. Yeah. On the next slide, we can now talk about some of the companies that I've had the pleasure of doing some consulting work for over the years. These are some of my clients. And I'd like to start off sort of like in reverse order. We don't go through all of these. I'm just trying to give you an idea of some of the names of the companies, some that you'll recognize. You'll realize it's quite a large variety. But the reason I want to show you this is because it's important to see the kinds of companies that hire consultants. And some of them you may recognize, then some again you won't. And I have a second slide, which also shows a few more companies that I've been involved with as a consultant, because that's what I've been doing mostly for the past several years. I really zeroed in finally in my career as a consultant, and I love it. I wouldn't exchange it for anything else in the whole wide world, and I'm really excited about being able to do what I do. Okay, so much now for industry and consulting. And just to mention something that you may find very important before I go to the next slide. When you tell people, as I am telling you today, that I did consulting work for certain companies, it's important that you get the company's permission before you release this information, because it could have some impact on some of their proprietary things that they're doing. For instance, if people know that they know me, Gary Blank, as an expert in motor control and brushless DC motors, and if they discover that this person was working for a certain client, it might suggest that that client is looking into controls and brushless motor controls, and that might be indicative of something. So there are people that I've done consulting work for that their names will not appear here because I do not have the permission to show their names, and especially some of them are involving security and government work, which obviously you won't see here either. So I just wanted to give you a flavor of that and give you some of the do's and don'ts to go with that. Before we go much farther, though, I'd like to put you into a position of answering a quiz. This is a sort of a quiz question. And a lot of people aren't sure what they mean when they say, I'm a consultant or I want to be a consultant. I want to clarify that just so you understand before we get much farther. So here's a multiple choice question, and I'd like you to choose your answer mentally and think about it. Who or what is a consultant? Is it someone who is retired or unemployed? You meet them in the store and you say, hey, what are you doing nowadays? The guy says, I'm consulting. What he really means is he's not doing anything. He's retired or unemployed. This is not a bad reflection. It just tells you that for some people, that's what the word consultant means. And you must understand that also. Or it could very well be number B. The person works for a consulting company. You know, there are companies like, I remember one called Anderson Consulting. You work for them. That's a company that finds business and they find clients, and you work as a salaried employee for that company. Somebody meets you in the street and say, well, what are you doing nowadays? Well, I'm a consultant. What you really mean is you're a salaried employee working for a consulting firm, and that is something else that people use the word consultant for. Or C, you work through an agency. This is sometimes people refer to as a job shop arrangement or a contract arrangement, where an agency is in the business of finding clients who need help. And they find a client, and they find you, and they'll bring you together. And so you're not working for the client directly. You end up you're being employed by the agency, but you work in the client's facility and do what the client asks you to do. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's something else that people call themselves consultants when they're doing that, and you have to accept that's another definition. Now we come to D. This person works independently. This is a person who does not work for an agency. They find their own business clients for themselves, and they work directly for the client, have contracts directly with the client. There's no third party, no intermediary in between you and the client. Now, that's the one I like best of all because it comes closest to what I like to do. I consider myself to be category D, but the answer to your question, the original question, is that they really all apply. It just depends on your point of view, and I like D better because D is what I've been doing, and that's a definition, but be prepared that the others deserve just as much respect for what they're doing because what they're doing is also very important. So I'm ready now to move on to the next slide. Now, just a quick review. If we were doing the 6-hour seminar, and we're not, and what we did last year or several months ago was session number 1, which became Consulting 101. We went through that very quickly. This is an hour. Told people how to get started without leaving their present job, because a lot of people are concerned if you leave your job, you'll have no income. And we tried to explain in that consulting seminar how you would actually phase into consulting and phase out of a job and do it in a very ethical and proper way. There's a way to do that. And so we spent time talking about that in the previous webinar. And the topics covered it very quickly. We went through an introduction. We talked about some of the true and false things about consulting, reasons people become a consultant. That's very, very important. And critical details of how to get started. And then a little bit about record keeping, because we all, as engineers, we love to keep records, especially for taxes and business purposes. And that's a very important thing for people who are just starting off. And next slide. Session 2, which we're not doing today, that's part of the 6-hour seminar, how to set your fees, a formula or formulas for setting fees. There are many things that you need to consider when a client asks you, well, what do you charge for your time? Do you charge $80 an hour, $150 an hour, or do you charge something else? You have to have a feel for this. And what we try to do in this part of the webinar or the seminar, to say, what we do the all-day seminar, is we try to give you the considerations and actually set up a formula so that in your head when people ask you, you can give them an answer almost instantaneously if you can do some very quick mental arithmetic. And so that's very helpful. There's also some other topics that are relevant. What about ethical considerations? Some of them are a little bit more stringent than they are for people who work on a job. And we spent time talking about why these are so important and how to handle things like diversity in the workplace and some of the questions about ethics. And recently I had a very, within the last 3 weeks, I was on a consulting assignment where ethics became a very critical issue when I recognized, and I obviously won't mention any names, but my client was trying to do something which I felt was unethical. They were taking advantage of another person's, copying another person's product, and I said, I love working for you guys, but I got to go. And so sometimes it's better to just move on and do something else. Another question often comes up, especially with a very young engineer. Do I have the experience to be a consultant? And then finally, most people do. We just have to understand what consulting is all about. And then, of course, how do you determine a fee? Then session number 3, very competitive world. You got to be ready when you are dealing with other consultants, how to get the business to stay with you. A lot of things you need to do is prepare both technically, physically, mentally, and professionally to get ready when you enter the arena, and then what to say and do in order to make a contact, write a proposal, get an interview, and to win the contract, which is very, very, very nice feeling when you win a contract. And brings us now to today. Session number 4, Consulting 102. How do you find clients? How do you find clients? So we're going to spend some time here reviewing several proven methods of finding clients. These are not textbook methods. These are things that I've done. Some of them may seem strange to you. And if they do, that's all right. They're strange to me too, but they work. And we want to talk about several proven methods of finding clients without doing things like mass mailing. I wasted a lot of money mailing resumes. I'll never do that again. That's a total waste of time and a waste of everything. And cold calling, if you're like me, many of us engineers, we're afraid to pick up the telephone and call, especially when the word sales or selling is around, because we tend to, for the most part, to be, shy people. And so we have to find ways to expose ourselves and to win business and still be shy at the same time. Okay, now part of the challenge with finding clients is that there's no marketplace. If you're trying to find a job, there's a marketplace. You can go to fairs, you can look at newspaper ads. There are things where employers are looking for employees, and there are many ways they can find you, or you can find them. However, there's nothing that exists right now for clients, like a client marketplace or a client fair or a consultant's marketplace or a consultant's fair. So there's no opportunity to meet. And I've had the experience of walking right past people who were looking for me and I'm looking for them, and we passed each other like strangers in the night and didn't know that I needed his business, I could help him, and he needed my help, and we just couldn't get together. So quickly I learned, no, no, no. I do not do flyers. I do not believe in putting business cards all over the place. I do not mail out tons of resumes. I do not put ads in the paper. I do not put ads in magazines. I do not use the yellow pages. I do not work through personnel or HR department. That's usually people that don't care to talk to consultants. But I'll tell you the things we do. So let's eliminate the no's and get to the yeses. And by the way, good news. In the consulting business, when you get started and you have 2 or 3 or 5 clients, it tends to snowball. When I first had the first 2 or 3 clients, I thought, wow, what happens when I finish these assignments? Well, have faith. Very often 2 becomes 4, and 4 becomes 8, and 8 becomes 12, and there seems to be a sort of an exponential progression, and that's very exciting. I call it the snowball effect, and you will see it. If you enter the consulting business and you're a little bit short initially on where to find clients, the good news is hang in there, because the rest will come if you do a good job. And this is because we had also a lot of repeat business. I've been doing consulting for clients who I started dealing with them about 20, 25 years ago, and they still call me back, and I put in a lot of time with them again. And if you keep on doing a good job, they'll call you back more and more. So as you go into the business further and further, you'll find that there's less pressure on how to find clients because you did the right things at the front end when you first got started. Well, I'm going to talk to you now about some of the how-tos, but let me first share with you a brief story that I think you would enjoy listening to, because it's going to fit into the things we're about to cover. I was working for a very fine company, very good job. They paid me well, treated me well. I loved what I was doing. But I always had this burning desire that I wanted to be on my own, because I felt I had so much more I could do if I were a consultant instead of being an employee. And this does not mean there's anything wrong with being an employee. Some employees are wonderful people, and I think it's a good relationship between employer and employer. But there are some people that have an itch, like I did, to be a consultant, to be more of a free person, to have more decision making about what to do with your time and where you want to work and when you want to work and what kind of projects you want to work on. And so I was sitting there like most people, thinking about it and kind of wishing and hoping something would happen. And then, strangely enough, it was the company I was working for that pushed me into consulting. Here's how it happened. The company at that time was doing some work for an overseas company, aircraft company, and they needed to send me to their client's place in Europe to do some things there that I had been working on. But they told me that once I'm there, I'll probably be there for maybe 3, maybe 6 months. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable with that because my wife had just had a new baby at the time, and I was very fond, as most new fathers are, of their little babies. And I didn't want to go and leave that baby because I was just too attached to being around the children. So I said, you know, I wish I didn't have to go. Is there something else I can do in the meantime? And they said, no, this is the only project we have. And I said, well, can I think it over? They said, we'll give you 30 days to think about it. And this was a Friday afternoon. I went home that Friday evening, not sure what to do with my life. And I happened to look into the newspaper. At the time, I was living in the Los Angeles area. I looked into the LA Times, and there was an ad of a gentleman who was a university professor in the Los Angeles area doing an independent seminar all day Saturday, the next day, on consulting. And I thought, wow, maybe I'm meant to go to this thing. It cost $99, so I thought it's worth it. So I went to this seminar the next day, and I really enjoyed everything he had to say. He taught me so much about consulting, and this was many, many years ago. Unfortunately, this wonderful gentleman who became a friend of mine, he passed away a few years ago. But along the way, I really got bubbling over with excitement. And then after the seminar was over, I had the courage to go up to him and say, can I buy you dinner tonight before we go home? And he was very courteous. He said, sure. So I paid for the dinner, and the seminar continued now on a one-on-one basis over dinner at a nearby restaurant. And during that time, he really focused. He said, now, are you really serious about this, or are you just thinking about it? I said, I'm really serious. And told him what my situation was. He told me exactly what to do, what to say, and so forth. And so I got started. And within the next 30 days, I continued my job in a professional way. I was there on time every morning, left at the proper time in the evening, never used a company telephone or fax machine or anything for anything outside their own business. But I was able to learn how to use my hours in the evenings and on Saturdays to start to build a consulting business. And some of those things are what we can be sharing, as we go along here today. So at the end of the 30 days, when the time was up, my manager said to me, well, what did you decide? And I said, I've decided I'm going to leave the job. I really enjoyed working here, but I feel the call to become a consultant. Oh, by the way, by this time I had 4 clients lined up. So I left in a good flavor. In other words, when we walked away, we were still friends. I mentioned that because I came back months later to work in the same place for the same person and got paid, consultant rates, which was kind of nice. So with that background now, let me go into talking about the how-to list. First thing I learned about want ads. How do you use want ads? Well, you're going to be surprised. It isn't just what you're thinking. No, it's not an ad in the paper saying, I want consulting business, I'm looking for clients. It's something that has nothing to do really with consulting. I look at the want ads in the employment section to find where they're looking for engineers who have a similar background to mine, and they're trying to hire these people. Now, you and I both know I am not looking for a job. I'm looking for a consulting assignment. And I watch the ad, and I circle it, I cut out the paper, I keep it, and I watch the paper the next week, and the next week, and the next week. My magic number is 4. If I see the same ad appearing in the paper 4 weeks in a row, I have to make a move. What I will do is I will contact the company and be very open up front and say, good afternoon or good morning. My name is Gary Blank. I'm an engineering consultant, and I saw your ad in the paper, and I know you're trying to find someone to fill this position. I am not looking for a job at your company. However, I would like to offer my services on a temporary basis to get your project moving and provide some help while you're trying to find a person to fill the position on a permanent basis. And you would be surprised how many companies say, well, yeah, I mean, you can come and work for 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks while we find the right person to employ. And yes, I even said, I'll help you interview to find a person to replace me. And many companies you'll find are so anxious to get their programs moved, they'll do that. And so I once told a friend of mine that says, I'm not bragging, but I can go to any city in the United States, and within 2 days I can find a consulting assignment. He says, well, yeah, but you have to wait 4 weeks, don't you? I says, no. I get the 4 weekly papers for the last 4 weeks. I don't have to wait for 4 weeks to go by. I can get old newspapers. I can go somewhere I can find 3 to 5 or even 8 positions that I could qualify for and help these people. Now, what I'm really trying to do at this point is to get my foot in the door, because once I'm there, I want them to like me. I want them to like the work I do, and these people will be interested in keeping me around as a consultant And that has been one way I found a lot of really, really good consulting assignments. And that's the way I use the want ads. I've had several positive responses, and I want to encourage you to try it. It's very simple. And the one thing that my mentor told me in the training session over dinner, he says, do what other people do not do. Don't do what everybody else does, because you just become one in a crowd. But do something unique. And he says that is something that not very many people will do, but I'm sharing it with you today because I've tried it and it works. Not 100% of the time, but enough times that it can make it worth your while. So I want to encourage you to keep up with the want ads and do a little bit of bookkeeping. If you're in a bigger hurry, find old newspapers. Go back 3-4 weeks and see if that position is still out there, and it could be a very good lead to find some consulting business. The next one that I learned about, and I've used this one very, very effectively, is alumni newsletters. Now, if you're like me and you've gone to several different universities or even one university, you get newsletters every so often, almost monthly or at least quarterly, from the university you attended with a section about what's going on with some of the alumni. It shows it by year, and it tells you, well, here's so-and-so who just became a manager or a vice president or has gotten a very important promotion or doing a very important job, because the whole idea of the alumni newsletter is to promote the things that the alumni have done after they leave the university, to show how they have gone on in the outside world to do very, very important and very good things. Well, the one time I got this letter from one of my universities, I opened it and I recognized a picture in there of a gentleman with whom I had gone to school. We were undergraduates together. We took a couple of courses together, and we were not very close friends, but we kind of knew each other, and we played in the same basketball team and intramural sports. And, you know, we hadn't seen each other in years, a long time. And here I look and I see it and I say, here's a picture of Norm. I remember Norm very well. He changed a little bit, but not too much. So I did the thing that my mentor told me to do. He says, don't call the person, don't email them. He says the thing to do is to write a letter. Get a piece of paper, which we don't do much of anymore. Remember, do the unusual. Get a piece of paper, like stationery, and write a letter. And my letter went something like this, very briefly and much to the point. Hi, Norm. I saw your picture in the recent alumni newsletter and was very glad to see how well you're doing. You certainly are a credit to the university, and I'm very proud to see you there. I don't know if you remember me. You and I played basketball together in classes, and if you do, fine. If you don't, maybe I'll come back to you after a while. I says, anyway, I just wanted to be sure to congratulate you on what you're doing. Keep up the good work. We're very proud of you. In the meantime, I've been working as a consultant. I do independent work, and I provide services in the area of electrical and electronic engineering, and that's been working out quite well for me, and I certainly hope that maybe someday, you know, we'll cross paths. Well, I put this in an envelope, address it to the company in Norm's name, put a stamp on it, mail it. Something very unusual, mailing letters, a good old-fashioned process. Norm gets the letter. I don't know what happens after that. But it wasn't more than 6 weeks later, my phone rang. Of course, I did put my business card in the letter that I sent to Norm. The phone rings, and he says, hi, Gary, this is Norm. Oh, hi, Norm. I kind of recognized when he called, when he said a name. And he said, well, he says, you know, I got to tell you something. He says, I got one letter from all the people who read the alumni newsletters, and that certainly jumped out at me right away. You're the only person that sent me a letter, and I'm very pleased to be able to call you and say thank you for that, and I really appreciate that. I remember my mentor said, do the unusual. Now, the story goes on. Norm says, you know, in my new position as Vice President of Engineering, I'm the person involved in hiring consultants from time to time. And I'm so glad to hear that you're in the consulting business because I can sure use your help in the areas that we're working. Lo and behold, I've been consulting for Norm's company for several years. I'm enjoying it. What did I do? Did I mail a resume? Did I do anything that was, you know, hard to do? No, I just wrote a letter, handwriting, pen and paper, envelope, 44-cent stamp. That does the trick. Well, it was a little less for postage back in those days. It wasn't quite 44, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, alumni newsletter is powerful tool for finding business. The third thing on my list here is government publications. Well, you know, many of us overlook the fact that the largest consumer in the country is our own government. And they're looking all the time for people who are consultants that can do consulting work for them. Many of these projects are to be done at your home, at your convenience, and you're done with a contractual arrangement whereby you charge a certain amount of money and you promise to deliver a certain result by a certain date, and you're on your way. And I'll tell you the one that I like best of all. If you are an internet person, put this into Google. Just 3 words. Commerce, Business, Daily. Commerce, Business, Daily. Once you put into Google, it opens a lot of different governmental publications, and when you click on those, you'll find more work than you can imagine. And people tell me, they say, well, you know, those things are usually won by, you know, more high-powered consultants or bigger companies. And I'm here to tell you that the opposite is quite the case. So many people are concerned that the competition is too stiff that they don't enter. And there was one contract that I won several years ago that I'm very proud of, that I could tell you that I'm the only person that went to the trouble of submitting a proposal. I read it first and I thought, oh, gee, you know, there are going to be 20 other people doing this, and why should I even waste my time? And so I sent it in anyway, and when the governmental department called me, they said, we want to thank you for your proposal. We like it. It's the only one we got, and we're ready to award the contract to you. So the government publications is a place where you can find a lot of really good engineering projects, things that would be very interesting and easy to work on, and you have to do your work religiously and do things very well, and I think it's one of the most overlooked areas for business. So again, just remember, go to Google and put in the words Commerce, Business, Daily, and you'll find a lot of what I'm looking for. Let's move on to the next topic here, attorneys and banks. Attorneys are not people who are necessarily friends of engineers or working with engineers or even come close to engineers. However, there are times when, because of various legal problems on the legal side, they need engineering help. I have found that so many times I've been called by attorneys who would ask me to examine a circuit or examine a piece of software or something, and in some cases even testify in court as an expert in electrical and electronic engineering. And these can be very beneficial, but you have to get to the attorneys somehow. So when I get involved with an attorney, I have an attorney who helped me with some of my trust work and some of my doing my will and so forth. Let these people know I'm an electrical engineer, electronic engineer. I do consulting work. I help people solve difficult problems with electrical and electronic engineering. And that's the end of the commercial. Once you do that, you'll be surprised the kind of results you'll get. The same is true of a bank. We all deal in a bank, and those people that sit in those offices off to the side who are various people in the bank, that have, not the tellers so much, but the people in the offices, they come in contact with people that are venture capitalists or looking for business, or these people need to find engineers. And as a customer of the bank, I let them know that I am an engineer and I help people solve electrical electronic engineering problems and so forth. And I find I've gotten a lot of business from letting the attorneys and the banks know what I do. And the next bullet on the slide is community activities. My mentor said, you know, he says, what are you doing in your community nowadays? I said, community? Well, nothing really. He says, you got to change that. He says, you have to start today and start getting involved in your community, not as a politician, but as somebody who works on various projects. Get involved with counseling or advising, or, you know, often to go to a high school and talk about engineering or something technical. He said, well, there's no money in it for me. You're absolutely right. But let me say this, there is money in it for you, and here's the way it works. When you do these community activities, you never know what exposure you're getting. It's very, very easy. The one that came easy for me was this. My little boy wanted to play soccer. I went to sign him up the day they were taking registration for soccer, and they said, oh, we don't have a coach. If we had a coach, we can accommodate your son. Can you coach? Well, I never coached anything in my life. And I said, okay, I will. So I took on the job of coaching a team of a bunch of little boys, and it was a lot of fun. We had a good season. We had a lot of fun. But along the way, there were 12 or 14 other parents who had their children involved with what I was doing. And of course, all the parents want to know, who is this person that's coaching their children? And so, very early in the season, I have a parents meeting. I said, I'm going to be coaching your son or your daughter, as the case may be. I'm an electrical electronic engineer. I help people in engineering solve difficult problems. And, end of speech. And I didn't know it at the time, but one of the fathers there, I learned a little bit later, a very brilliant engineer, listened to what I had to say, and after about 3 or 4 weeks, he says, I'd like to have you come talk to some of the people in my company. I said, well, what's your company called? He said, it's called Hughes Aircraft in El Segundo, California. I went over there, he introduced me, and I spent the next several months, years, doing a lot of consulting work for them, all because I decided to expose myself to the community and do community activities. You can think of things that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be coaching soccer. It could be working on committees, it could be working through your middle school or high school or whatever, but you got to get involved. And when you get involved, you question yourself and say, am I really doing the right thing? So let's move on now to the next part of the list on the next slide. And here we find 5 more bullets. Let's talk about these 5 objects. This first one is one that's really going to surprise you. How to use university faculty and administrators to get consulting work. I don't make up the rules, but I know this for a fact, that very often when a company has difficulty with technical problems, they feel as if somebody at the university can help. And so they end up calling the university and asking for the electrical engineering department, and they say, can you guys help us? We got a problem. And let me back up here a minute. What I like to do is I go to a nearby university, when I'm not teaching, of course, I'm just a consulting engineer, and I go and I said, I know your IEEE student chapter has meetings regularly, and I know you like to have speakers from industry. I'd be happy to come and talk for a half hour, an hour about what it's like in industry and engineering and opportunities. And the faculty will love you for that because they're looking, especially the faculty advisor, they're looking for people who would come and bring to the university something. By the way, this is all free. I'm going to come and talk, and I'm going to have to take time off from work. But when you're going to talk to the students, people will remember you, especially the department chairman and other people on the faculty. They'll say, boy, we're sure glad you came by and blah, blah, blah. The next time the phone rings and the company calls and says, well, we're having some difficulty and we're trying to solve this problem, the answer may not necessarily be a member of the faculty can solve the problem, but the department chair or the associate department chair in one case that I had experience with will say, well, none of our faculty is available right now to work on a project, but we had a consultant here a couple of weeks ago who spoke to our students, and he seemed to be a very competent person. We'll give you his name and telephone number, and they can contact him. What a powerful recommendation to come from a university faculty member to say, this guy, we saw him, we heard him talk, he seemed like a pretty, regular guy. And that's what I mean of how to use them. And I don't mean using in a derogatory sense. I mean in a very positive way, because I have something to give to the students. I have something to give to the university when I go there as a consultant and say, let me tell you about what it's like in industry, what it's like when you're working, what kind of areas are important. And the students just love it, and the faculty loves it even more. And you become well known by the faculty, and especially the department chairman, and those are the people who you're looking for. Remember, it's not the faculty and the administrators who are going to hire you as a consultant. It's the people that they know that they're going to refer you to a little bit later. On the next bullet, we talk about teaching. Well, you say, I've never taught before. Well, maybe it's time you start thinking about it, because teaching is a lot of fun. And you don't have to necessarily have a degree. A lot of people think you got to have a PhD to teach. Usually this is true when you're a full-time faculty member at most universities. You need to have a PhD to become an assistant, associate, or a full professor. But there are many schools where they hire you as what is sometimes called adjunct professors, which is another way of saying a part-time instructor, where you can go in there and teach a course in the evenings. And I got to tell you right up front, pay, it says pay with 2 question marks. Oh, they'll pay you, but you'll be lucky if the pay covers the gas money, because it is not meant to pay so generously to a lot of people who do it. Oh, you make a bit of money, but not that much. What I did when I look back, and I remember my mentor saying, go out and make yourself available at the university. And I thought, yeah, but I'm not trying to have university students hire me. But I signed up to teach a course at UCLA, and it was a course in feedback control. A course with, Bode plots and root locus and Nyquist diagrams and state vectors and that kind of good stuff. And I enjoyed teaching that. I got there and I was teaching the class, and the very first day, you go to class, says, "Good evening, class. My name is Dr. Gary Blank. I'm going to be your teacher for this course." And he goes through the whole introduction. Then you say, "I'm a full-time, I'm a full-time engineering consultant. I help solve problems that are related to controls and electronics." And that basically is the speech. And that's it, no more. End of commercial, nothing else to say. It'd be sort of unethical to do anything beyond that point. And I watched the class, and the class was with about 25, 30 people, and I had fun. We went through, the usual stuff with Laplace transforms and all that good stuff. And then about the end of the sixth class, there was a gentleman who always sat way in the back, a senior gentleman, looked very distinguished, was very nicely dressed always, never said a word. He came to me during the break around the fifth or sixth class, and he says, "Dr. Blank," says, "I've been watching you now for the last 5 or 6 weeks." He says, "You know what? I think you can be a big help to me." I says, "Oh, in what way?" I thought he was talking about the class. He says, "I'm the Vice President of Engineering at Unisys, and we can sure use somebody like you to come and help with some of the problems we have with feedback controls and systems and so forth. And would you be willing to stop by and talk to some of our engineers?" Well, I had to restrain myself from jumping up and down for joy. But isn't that what my mentor was talking about? And it happened not just once, not just twice, but many, many times. When you go to teach a course like I did at UCLA, it was a long drive. You had to pay to park. And I figured one time, by the time I figured my gas and paying to park for what they were paying me, I was working for a little less than minimum wage. No reflection on the university. It's a fine school, and it's typical of many situations that involve part-time teaching. But you know what? Over the next 7 years, I was a very heavily used consultant for Unisys, also known as Burroughs Corporation at that time. Did a lot of work for them, made a lot of money, and enjoyed it. Why did that happen? Because I went to the trouble of trying to find a part-time teaching position, not because of the money, not because of the degree, just because I know that exposure is what you really need. Okay, so much then on teaching, degree or pay. Let's move on to speaking engagements. Well, that's very similar. I want to let you know that I am encouraged, or I was encouraged by my mentor, to seek speaking engagements. Many sections in IEEE, many different organizations similar to IEEE, are also looking for people to come and talk about anything. You don't have to go and know them. You don't have to go and speak about something very unusual. I heard a speaker at a meeting recently, and we are an engineering group, and we invited a speaker. The guy came and talked about racing, what do they call it? Racing railroad models, cars, racing cars. It was very interesting. It was not electrical engineering or electronic engineering, but I looked again and I says, "Wow, this is very impressive." And you start to network with people who are doing things like that. So I think speaking engagements, look for them when you can. You don't have to talk about, equations and mathematics. You can talk about something maybe it's a hobby of yours. I know a friend of mine who's an engineer. He's teaching a course at our university regularly on sailing, and that's one of his hobbies. So you have to go out and do something like that. Let me go on now to the next bullet on the list, consultant networks. A few years ago, the IEEE and IEEE USA, in their wisdom, decided to start forming these consulting networks. It provides a place for consultants to get together with fellow consultants and talk about the business and the industry and to exchange ideas, to exchange leads. And you start off as a very humble beginning with just 2 or 3 people and 2 or 3 networks, and it has grown over the years. The IEEE USA now has over 40 consultants networks all over the country, mostly in metropolitan areas, but there are some in other areas that are not metropolitan. And these have been working very well, and especially in our economy, where more people are looking for consulting work, these consulting networks have become very, very powerful. If you don't have one close by or in your section, it's very easy to start one. We'll talk a little about that in just a minute. But really, the consultant networks have been very powerful because what happens when we get together at a meeting is we exchange ideas. Now, I may be working on a project where I'm the electronics controls guy, but I overhear the manager says, I sure wish I had a C++ guy who could come here and write some programs for me. Well, I know in my network, I'm a member of one network, I know within my network there are several people who are very good at doing C++. And so I refer them to the manager I'm working for, and that's a very powerful recommendation when you can recommend somebody directly, eyeball to eyeball, to the manager. And you know what happened someday? That guy I recommended, who got the job because of my recommendation, he will hear a manager someplace saying, boy, I sure wish you can find somebody who's good at electronic controls and motor controls, and you know, he'll think about me, of course, because we do it, we don't charge each other, it's sort of a friendship thing we have. There's a lot of bonding goes on in a consultant's network. And if you have a network and it's run the right way, it could be a very exciting thing to look forward to getting together with the other consultants and sharing ideas and learning from them, and especially sharing business leads, which are very plentiful in our business. So the IEEE has been fostering these networks, and they've been growing rapidly over the years, and we're seeing them growing even as, you know, recently as this year, we've had several new networks being added to our list. And now we're seeing networks being formed overseas, and all under the umbrella of the IEEE and IEEE USA. Okay, what's next? The Internet. Well, the Internet, as you know, is a new member, and we didn't have this available 25 or 30 years ago. But since we had it available, we've learned so many ways of using it. And people say, well, if I have a website and I put up my resume, will people find me? And the answer is probably not, because there's so many websites up there, it'd just be just one in a million. How do people find you? Well, you remember a little while ago talking about when people have problems, they tend to want to call the nearby university and ask for help. But there's another person or organization that people tend to call when they have problems. They have problems with electrical, electronic things. They say, why don't we contact the IEEE and see what they can do to help us? And so when they contact the IEEE, which people frequently do, they'll find there's something that we're very, very excited about. The IEEE USA has made it possible for consultants like you and me to put up our resume on a database that is run by the IEEE, and people will find you. Right now we have several hundred consultants from around the country and outside the country also who have listed their resumes on the IEEE USA database. Now, why I'm going back and forth between USA and not saying USA is very simple. The initial start of all this was by the IEEE USA, which, as you know, covers the United States of America. But recently we've been bonding more with people overseas, and they're all brothers to us because they're all IEEE members. And so we're finding that we're sort of expanding a little bit, and we're doing things with helping the people who are forming IEEE consultants networks outside of the United States. And so that's a very encouraging thing. And those people, any member of the IEEE, whether it be in the USA or overseas, you can have your resume put on the database. And yes, there's a charge for that. The IEEE charges $79 a year. That charge may vary a little bit, but that's a good number to work with. And I've had people put their resume up there, and they say to me after a year, well, nobody contacted me. I say, well, let's look at your resume. It needs to be rewritten, or, you know, it needs to make some changes so we can attract some attention there. But then people say to me, yeah, but that's a lot of money. Well, when you're a consultant, you know you make $79 or more an hour, and so within a year, you'll make that back very quickly. So, you know, there are several ways looking at this, and the way I look at it is that I give it a try, and I tell people, if it isn't working for you after 2 or 3 months, have an expert, have somebody else take a look at it and see what should be changed or made different, and keep changing until you get the right structure so that people would start finding you. It's a very powerful database. It also has the capability of posting. Some companies have it, and they post their needs for consultants. And I think you'll find it very interesting, too, when you get to that point. I'll tell you a little more about that, because on the very next slide, I want to mention to you that the IEEE USA has a consultants database for all IEEE members, whether or not you're a member of Consultants Network. It doesn't matter. If you go to the address shown there, which is IEEEUSA.org/business, you'll fall right into it, because under Consultants, you'll click on the IEEE USA Consultants database, and you'll find the database that I'm talking about. And you'll see fellow engineers like yourself And do we have enough competition there? Are you kidding? If we had 1,000 names in there, it's still not enough because there's just so much work out there. There isn't that much competition. So I think it's a very good thing. Take a look at it. It's a worthwhile thing. So as I move into the conclusion now, as we approach the end of our hour together, I just want to encourage you to do a couple of things. First of all, if you're interested in starting or even expanding a successful consulting practice using the 6-hour seminar workshop, feel free to contact me. My email address you'll find way back at the first page is just g.l.blank, B-L-A-N-K, at IEEE.org, and I'll be happy to help you. Also, how to prepare for the FE&P exams. That's becoming very important, especially in the consulting business, because more and more consultants are being required to have a PE license, and we talked about that a little bit too, and I can help you with that part of it, so contact me again. If you're looking for how to start a local consultants network close to where you live, if you can find just 3 or 4 people, they don't have to be consultants, just be 3 or 4 members of the IEEE. You fill out a form, which you can find at the website I'm going to send you. Just fill it out, and lo and behold, you start a network. And we'll help you to grow the network. And then finally, after you have a network, some people like to have the network become next level. It's called an affinity group in the IEEE. And affinity groups are groups that the IEEE as a whole has established, and they get a lot of respect. And one of the nice things that your section will like, because every network is somehow under a section. There's got to be a section nearby. Even if the section is 100 miles away, you still got to be under a section of some kind. But the section doesn't have to do anything for you except to encourage you. Maybe put your meetings in their newsletter. It won't cost them anything. But here's the good part. Any section that has an affinity group gets money back from the IEEE every year for having an affinity group within their section. So I can go to any section and say, you know what? This is a win-win situation. We'd like you to help us advertise our meetings in your newsletter. We don't want your money. We don't want anything else from you. We want your support. And if you can do that, we can form our network, which will grow, and this network will become a very useful thing. Plus, you get money back every year from National for having a consultants network. So this brings us now down to the end of the material here on how to find clients, how clients can find you. I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm going to try to answer some of the questions now. Essentially, I'm finished at this point. I just want to see what kind of questions we have here. And first of all, I should mention that the Commerce Business Daily works with software project managers. Yes, yes it does. There are very often requests for project managers relative to that, so that's a good idea. The webinar recording and slides will be posted to our website sometime within the next week or so. So if you want to come back and review some things we've said and some things we've shown, you're welcome to do so. And are there any other questions at this time that you'd like to ask? If you do, I'm scrolling through some of them here to see what we have. Okay. I'm not seeing any new ones coming in. So, does ACM have consultant network? I don't know about ACM, but I know a lot of ACM members become IEEE members, and then they become part of the IEEE consultants networks, which have been doing a lot of good work in software engineering. So that's been very, very effective also. In Commerce Business Daily, we answer that, and I think I'm just about at the end of our hour. So I would like to thank you for your enthusiasm for spending the time with me today, and I hope that I've helped you in some way as far as building your consulting business on learning how to find clients. So unless there's anything else right now, I'm going to sign off and say goodbye.